Hello, my name's Phil Dolman and this video is called Learn the Form. And this is something that doesn't just apply to ukulele players, it applies to anybody playing more or less any kind of music. But particularly with my experience of teaching and working with ukulele groups is sometimes we end up just staring at the page and reacting to what's happening on the page without really thinking about where the song goes, what are all the parts of the song, what order do they come in. You wouldn't just go off on a walk somewhere where you'd never been before without a map. And learning the form of a song is a way of making a map of that song so that we understand what's going to come next. I'm not really concerned about predicting what chord comes next. I've got plenty of videos that will help you figure out how to learn songs, how to memorize songs, and how to figure out ways of guessing, an educated guess, as to what the next chord is likely to be. This is more taking a step back from that and looking at the shape of the song. And lots of songs have different patterns. So here's a very, very simple one here. I've just put Hound Dog on the screen. Now there are two bits to that. Don't worry about the chart at the top at the moment. If you look at the bit at the bottom, then that is just what you might see in a ukulele club songbook. If we look at the bit at the top, and I'll explain this now because we're going to use this throughout the video, that is the same information musically, no lyrics, but musically, but each box in that grid is a bar of music. Now, Hound Dog is in 4/4 time, which means each little box is a count of 4. And if you see a chord name in a box, then you play that one. But then if you see a little percentage mark, we treat that as a ditto. And that means we do the same thing in the next bar and the same thing in the next bar. So you can see already from that that the first 4 bars of this song are just a C chord. As a little aside, why do we do that? Well, if we had a song that had lots and lots of bars of C and 1 bar of G in the middle of it, you'd probably miss that bar of G, because a G and a C look like each other, and in the heat of the moment, if you're just reading C's, you might miss that. Whereas with this, when we see a letter or a chord name, we know it's time to change chord because it's a new chord and not just more of the same. We can see from that though that that song has 12 bars, and we can even learn from it that the first chord lasts for 4 bars, the next 2 chords last half as long, and on the last line we have 2 chords that last half as long again, just 1 bar each. So that helps us, even though there's not much structure to this song, it's just one section that goes round and round and round, we could play that and get more and more confident with it. If there was a solo section where we weren't singing, which is one of the places that ukulele groups often have an issue, is if there's an instrumental verse with no singing, suddenly there's nothing to hang the chords off, and if you're used to reading chords above words and there are no words, then everybody might be doing something in their own head slightly different, and that's when we get stumbles and disagreements and half the group going for a chorus when it's not really time for the chorus yet, things like that. So having a structure like this is a really useful thing. Very, very simple structure. Let's look at another very common song presented in the same way, but this time there are different sections to the song. This is one you've probably all played. It's 5'2" Eyes of Blue. And this is the best way to learn these things, is to look at songs you already know or songs you're familiar with and see how you can make them look better on the page, but also use that information to help you learn it better. So you probably already know 5'2". Here's a version of 5'2" that I've put together that is actually very much like some of the versions you will see that you might just find off the internet. Now the problem with this one is there's no spaces between sections, no line breaks. It's just one big mass of text. Some of the lines are quite long, some of them are short, and musically speaking, they're not all the same number of bars long, each line. So the only way to play that is to start at the top and make your way down, reacting to every chord change as it comes. Now, when I was learning to drive many decades ago, my driving instructor said to me, of course, you've got to be ready to react to things. But more importantly, you've got to be aware of your surroundings so you can predict something that you might have to take an action to avoid. So rather than slamming on the brakes because someone steps out in front of you, much better to be aware that there's a pedestrian over there who seems to be making their way towards the edge of the road quite quickly. And you go, they might step out in front of me. Then you're not reacting to it anymore. You can take action before it happens to make sure that there isn't a problem, there isn't an accident. Same thing here. 5'2" presented like that, and I have seen this actually on paper at ukulele groups, not this particular one, this is just an example, but I've seen them presented like this, and if you look on the internet you will see things presented like this. Now I'm going to present it in a new way, and yes, I'm going to add my little grid at the top, my little chart, but don't worry too much about that for the moment. We'll just focus in on the bottom bit. Now what can you see straight away? I can see 4 separate sections to this song. I can also see that one of them is in italics, so that might mean that that's musically a different thing. I can also see that the bits that aren't in italics all are the same shape. They're all the same number of lines. And if I have a look at them, I can see that the chords over the first little bit are the same as the chords over the second little bit, are the same as the chords over the last little bit. And I can see the bit in italics has different chords. Straight away, I can see the form of this song. Let's have a look at it on the chart that I would have at the top of the page. Now, sometimes when you have sections that repeat, we might put repeat marks on a chart like this, so it makes it smaller, but just for clarity on this video, I'm not going to put any repeat marks or anything that would send you flying around the chart. We're just going to start at the top and go to the bottom. And you can already see the shape is very much like the words. We have a lot of something and then a different bit and then not quite so much of something below it, which is exactly the same as the lyrics and chords looked. If we have a look at these, we can see that the first 2 lines of this chart are the same as the first 2 lines of the lyrics on the page. The next 2 lines are the same as the next 2 lines of lyrics, but also they are the same musically as the first 2. The second 2 lines are the same as the first 2 lines. Then we have that bit that I've got in italics and I've shaded it on the chart to make it really stand out. That's the bit that's a different section that matches up with the italics in the lyrics. And then the last 2 lines are also the same as the first 2 lines. Now what we often do is label these sections using letters of the alphabet. Now they're not intended to be musical notes or chords. We're just labeling things. The first thing we see, we call it A. The second thing we see, we call it B. So let's have a look. The first 2 lines, well, that's a complete thing because the next 2 lines are just that again, and the last 2 lines are just that again. So we can call those first 2 lines an A section. The next 2 lines are the same, so that would be another A section. The next bit is different. So we'll label that with the next letter of the alphabet, B. Then the last 2 lines are the same as the first 2 lines and the next 2 lines, so that's another A section. So our structure, our form for this song is A, A, B, A. In jazz, sometimes that B section gets called the bridge, but it doesn't matter. It's just another part of the song that we know is going to come up, and we have to be prepared for that bit to arrive in the song. If we know when it's going to arrive nice and clearly like that, there won't be that mad scramble where half the people in the group haven't realised that the thing that comes next is that B section, that bridge. And so they go to play a C, this bit doesn't start on a C, they realise half a bar in that they're doing something different to everybody else. There's a bit of a loss of rhythm and it gets a bit quiet because people stop playing because they're scared that they played the wrong chord. So let's have a little look at play through the music of 5'2", but we're not going to sing it because this is a big problem. When you've got a group of people playing together and then the solos happen and the melody and the words disappear and the soloist might be doing something that's quite different to the melody, then all the people who are relying on hanging chords off words will get lost. And this is the big issue. I see some people stop playing kazoos and other people will back them up and half the people get lost and nobody really knows then when to start singing again after the solo. So let's do it without singing. 1, 2, 3, 4. bars of this chord. Then we do all of that again on the next two lines. Another A section. Now this is our second A section, so what comes next is the B section. Here it comes. And then an A section again. Now when we get to the end of the song, we're going to repeat the whole thing. Here's an important thing to remember. We've just done an A section, now we're at the top of the chart. This feels like we're doing a second A section, doesn't it? Because we finished on an A section, but we're not. This is the first A section. I've seen lots of jazz musicians jump into the bridge at that point because they've just heard two A sections, forgetting that one of those A sections was at the end of the last pass through. Now that's two A sections. Here comes the bridge. Final A section to finish. And yes, I have seen many very famous jazz musicians sort of head off towards the bridge and then realise what they've done, because we hear three A sections when we repeat the whole thing. Now, knowing the form of 5/2 is really important. Thousands of jazz songs use the A-A-B-A structure. Thousands of them. So if you're used to playing a song that does a thing, does it again, does a different thing, and then does the first thing again, and then repeats that whole thing round and round, if you're used to that, you'll encounter it in so many jazz songs. And when I say jazz, I mean right back into the 19 teens and even before that. Early jazz, right through to some modern jazz bands now, are still using that same form. Of course, if you're playing pop songs, folk songs, country songs, you might find that you have more sections. You might have an intro that's an iconic intro to that song, so you really got to have it. Then a verse, then maybe another verse before you hit the chorus. Then a verse, then another chorus. You might have a middle eight somewhere in there. That middle eight might happen twice. You might have something that's often called a pre-chorus, which is a little bit like the middle eight, but the verse does something, but then before you go to a chorus, you have an extra little bit that leads us into the chorus. That only ever happens when you're going into a chorus. There are so many different things you can have. So it's a great idea to take some of your song sheets and see if you can map them out. Are they sensibly laid out on the page? Do they show you where the bits of this song are? Or are you just going to be staring at a mass of chords and words that don't really have any sense at all about musical meter, how many bars, how many lines of the music if you've got that chart at the top, and how many times something is the same over and over again, rather than just going through a long page of chords and words. Now, I'm not going to play this one for you because I fear it would probably get some kind of copyright strike, but have a look at some of the songs by the Beatles. Particularly Obla-Di Obla-Da, for example, which has 3 different sections. But most of the time you're playing the same chords. But those chords will be in a different order in each part of the tune. And the bridge of that song, which is the "In a couple of years they'll have built a home sweet home," starts on the chord of F, whereas everything else in the song starts on the key of C. It's a bit like 5/2. The A section starts on a C, the bridge starts on an E7. Knowing that that thing is about to come If you've got that in your songbook, have a look at it. How is it laid out on your page? Can you make it more understandable as a map of the song? I hope this has proved helpful, and I hope, if you try this out with some of the songs in your songbook, it might help iron out some of those little bits of a song that we all have where there's a little hiccup, where not everybody agrees on the thing we should be doing at that point. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.